And I'm going to go into Bridge to find the demo image. Okay. All right, so in the demo image, the sample CS3, we used the ducky before. Today, I'm going to pick this doggy picture. There are two versions. One is Photoshop, one is TIFF. Either one would work. I'm gonna just grab the Photoshop version and then open them. And let's take a look at this image. And everyone, if you can take a look at this picture too. So before you start adjusting or doing anything, we kind of have to know, or maybe we don't, but it's helpful that if you know what's wrong or what needs to be improved in this picture. So I would like you to take a look at this picture. I mean, this projection and those two are slightly different. This is a lot more vivid colors here, but what needs to be improved in here? Is there anything that you can point out before we start looking into this adjustment?
I can't tell, but is it clipped?
You can't tell, but it is clipped.
Well, I can't see it very
Can you explain about what do you mean by clipping?
Well, in the histogram it has that white arrow right there. Isn't that, I can't actually see that far very well.
Okay.
Is that what it says?
So the Kathy says clipping. That's a new word for maybe some of you guys. So clipping, and I think Kathy, you are referring to the top of the head, the doggy's head. Clipping can happen in highlights or shadow areas when it's extremely bright or extremely dark. Then that information wouldn't fit between this histogram that you can see. The Cristin is showing that over there, right? So the histogram shows the information about the picture. It has lots of information in the midtones, not too much on the highlight or not too much on the shadows, but slightly darker side, seems like. And then if things would not fit within that area because it's too bright or it's too dark, that information, we call it clipping. So it's clipped, no information whatsoever. So it's black without information, detail, or white without detail. It's just paper white or a lots of black inks and no details. That's clipping. And that is what Kathy's pointed out. She's not really sure, but seems like the head of the doggy looks like it's clipping. Clipping you can kind of tell by looking at the histogram, and if it spikes up against the right edge of the histogram, or that means highlight clipping. And left side, it spikes up to the left side, then that means that shadow information is clipping. Okay, can you get rid of that one? Thank you. So that was one thing that was pointed out.
What's our tone? Is it too cool or too cold?
Color. Color. Is it too cool or too cool? Too warm?
Yeah.
It is definitely not so warm. Like today outside. It has a lot of sunshine, but then this one absolutely looks like it has a lot of cool tone overall. That is what we can kind of observe, or some of you observe. Yeah?
Is the fidelity not high enough, for the resolution?
The resolution high enough? Well, resolution, I didn't scan this picture, so that part I will put it aside. Yeah. So let's focus on the tonal and color quality in here.
Too many shadows.
Too many shadows. So dark. The exposure is slightly darker. So I think I started to hear some of the issues that could be fixed. So let's kind of start looking into that too. I heard three things. A possibly highlight clipping and color too cool. And then another thing was possibly slightly underexposed. So those three things, and then see if that is really there. So if you can go into your computer and then everyone you can find this picture. Going to Bridge. If you open up Bridge and then if you go to sample CS3 and find the vanishing point, the doggy picture, you can either pick the PSD version or TIFF version, either or is fine. It's basically the same picture. So for the assignment purposes, we're going to create a file that is one original and one auto adjustment, one manual adjustment, basically. So this one, if you like to have a copy, so you just simply go to Save As. And then you can say original. And let's save it to somewhere other than CS3 folders. You can go to desktop, you can go to student storage alias, and you see you find the IAS classes folder, I think, there. So, or somewhere on the desktop, anywhere that you can find easily. That's what we're looking for. And change the file name as original somewhere, so we know that this is original version. I'm gonna actually make the new folder and then call it Project 1 Demo. And let's save that. You should see the file name changed. That's one way to make a copy. There are few ways to do one thing in Photoshop all the time. Not just one thing, but one way, but few ways to do one thing. If you go to Image from the top menu, that's another way to make a duplicate. And then you can go to Duplicate. And say Duplicate. And now this time, you can say not original, but let's apply auto adjustment to this. So I'm going to call it auto. Image duplicate. From the top menu, I went to Image and Duplicate. And then I changed it to, well, I added auto before the file name here. You can probably get rid of this copy too. It's no longer a copy. And say OK. Now you can see that I have original opened, auto version opened, so there are two files. Make sure that you are working on the auto version. It's highlighted. Auto adjustment is really simple. So simple that I don't know if I have to do twice. So maybe we'll do this once. To apply auto adjustments, simply you go from image from the top menu, and there are here auto tone, auto contrast, and auto color. I will just keep adding them, starting auto tone, auto contrast, auto color. So basically, you have no control, but let Photoshop do the job. You okay? Then let's save this auto version. Let's go to File and Save. File and Save. And let's make sure that this file is saved with the original vanishing point. So make sure that it's going to be saved on the same place. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. So auto version done. I probably don't need this, so I'm going to close this auto. All right. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to make a duplicate again from the original, not from the auto one. Let's make sure that you're opening the original vanishing point. That is not, that doesn't have the auto adjustment apply to. It's the original one. And this one, this time, we're going to change the original to manual adjustment. And we're going to apply manual adjustment. So let's do that up to that point. Manual adjustments doesn't have any adjustment applied to. So from here, I would like you to focus on what's projected and not really working at the same time, but just really look at what's projected. I'll do this process twice. Once with you looking, and I will answer any questions. And second time, you follow me. And I will answer questions by that time too, if you have any. Okay? So at this point, the manual adjustment should happen. But when you do a manual adjustment, I should start looking into a toolbox and find a color sampler tool. The color sampler tool looks like this. It's eyedropper looking things, but with a little circle with cross on it. So if you hold this, it's usually hidden behind the eyedropper tool. But what you like is color sampler tool. This color sampler tool is very helpful to figure out what kind of color and tones you are dealing with in the image. You can if you have a keen eye, then you can probably pick up certain color shift and color biases, but this one, it's more mathematical, and you can see it as a guide with numbers, and that is also helpful as a guide, right? So when you go into use this color sampler tool, as soon as I change this to a color sampler tool, you can see on the top the option changes. It asks you to choose the sample size of the color information where you are taking, basically. Right now it's set to point sample, means 1 pixel. You don't really want to set it to 1 pixel because if you just move a millimeter left or right, the color information starts to change. You like to usually have 3 by 3 or 5 by 5 average sample sizes. When you start to deal with really large file, like few hundred megabyte or maybe gigabyte files, then you might want to go even larger sample size. But for this 20, 30, 40 megabyte size files, 3 or 5 by 5, these are good numbers. I'm going to just go to 5 by 5 and see. So I'm going to sample from 5 pixels by 5 pixel area to get the color information. And I'm going to change this one to photography, and there is something called info palette. And the info palette basically gives the color information. And what I'm looking for with this color sampler tool is to look at this image and kind of specify where would be the neutral area. By looking at this picture, where do you think is the neutral area? Kind of guess. I would guess too. Gray. There are gray areas where the floor. So there are different floors here. I'm gonna choose somewhere lighter ones here. And somewhere darker here too. These are darker area. Where else you can guess that could be neutral? The head, I heard the head, the doggy's head. Rope. I think it is, well, I don't know what that is actually. And then the head, shadow area of the coat, the doggy nose, possibly. Anywhere else? The brush, this area, yeah. Shadows on the leaves. That is a I might actually try to avoid that area because light hits and the shadow will be casted with the green probably. Possibly could have green cast around it. So I probably wouldn't go too much close, but let's see, just as a sample. You can move these samples in between the boards. I have a big boards between areas. I will go in there too. I can have the sample up to 10. I don't know if I need that many sample, but I have 9 of them. So I'll say good for now. Good for now. All right. And I would like everyone to look at the numbers here that we picked. And then see if there is any tendencies of those RGB numbering system. So number 1, the RGB set is something like this. Number 2, 3, something like that. And I would like you to look through and then see a rough tendencies of all the numbers, the numbered area. I mean, if you see anything.
Add magenta and add yellow.
So earlier, somebody pointed out that this picture possibly is cool, and I think that is correct. That is correct. That overall seems like red is the least numbers. And then red, look at this chart. It's made of what color? Yellow and magenta. And then those two colors are considered all warm tones. If you look at this, all up here, those are warm tones. And then down here, cool tones. And we're saying all the warm tones are kind of missing in this picture. But there are lots of cool tones. So that is what we saw before we look at the numbers, but numbers also tell us that. And then I heard then add yellow or magenta. That's, I think, is a good strategy. Mostly, well, not so much. Well, in here, the red. If you look at the numbers, the red is the least numbers. This is least too. This is least. This is so. If you look at all of them, red has the least numbers for all of them except for this one, number 9. I don't know where number 9 is. Number 9 is here. But it's an anomaly, and all the others ones tells us that it has more cyan, but not too much red. Okay. So this is a guide that we can also assume that this picture needs some red or warmth in it too, right? Okay, so to adjust it, there are a few ways to go about it, but the first thing you like to do is to go and start using adjustment layers. Adjustment layers are hidden in adjustment palettes, and today we're going to use this levels, curves, hue and saturation, possibly this color balance too. So levels is our first thing. We'll come back to it so you don't have to work on your image, but just look at this, okay? On here, before we start doing anything, I would like to do one more thing to specify what would be the information for darkest dark and then lightest light. This window shows me a histogram, same as a histogram here, but it's not colorful, but it's basically the same information. With this histogram, there is this color sampler tools, well, the black point sampler tool and white point sampler tool. And those two things, you're going to specify tones. I'm going to double click on it. That is the black point. It tells me that this is the darkest dark that it can get. If you look at the RGB numbers, it's 0 and 0 and 0. It could be possibly, earlier we talked about the terminology clipping. If you use this information, it clips the shadow information. I would like to change this so that the shadow information wouldn't clip. I'm gonna increase the tone slightly, and then I don't know if you see the differences of the two. I don't know. Yeah, we do see the differences on the side. I don't see it on the projector, but so the 5 points would make it so that the tone, the shadow information would no longer clip completely, just black ink. And I'll say, okay. Would you like to target this color as a default? Yes. I'll do the same thing to white points. It's possibly just highlight clipping. I don't want to have the highlight clipping. I would like to make it slightly with detail. 255, 255, 255. Do you know where this number is coming from? Right. So last week we looked into 16-bit, 8-bit tonal informations. And that was 0 to 155, including 0, that is 256 tonal varieties. So 255 means it's pure white. We would like to change it to 250. So same as black. The white, I'm going to just put a little tone so that, you see it's very subtle, but it's not just the paper white, but something is there. And this is extremely important. I will get back to this again with you guys, but you should set the settings at home with your Photoshop too. So that white is not paper white, but some information. Black is not just the ink, black ink, but some information on it too. And say okay, and adjust it. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So let's do this. Let's take a look at your file then. Let's take a look at your file and do the same thing. First, I would like you to grab the color sampler tool. With the color sampler tool, you would like to change the sample size to not a point sample, but 3 by 3 or 5 by 5. And then simply try to find the area that is supposed to be neutral, not neutral yet, supposed to be neutral. So we kind of have to have an imagination. It's like, okay, this worn out wooden deck could be neutral. This rope or hose or some object in the back could be neutral. The part of the dog, different areas, different tones that you can specify the area that could be neutral too. If it is hard to see, I recommend you to zoom in so that you can see. Command and plus. Command and plus on the keyboard will let you zoom in. If you'd like to see a different part of the image, if you hold space bar, that would give you the hand mark so you can see through the part of the image and specify the area that you like to get the sample from. Right? Command and minus will zoom out. So the sample area can be up to 10 places, but you don't have to have 10 places. 10 areas to sample from may be a little confusing. So if you know a specific area that you think is mostly just neutral, then maybe darker area, shadow, highlight, and the midtone areas. Those are probably 3 areas that you can probably have for the sample area. Once you have the sampled area, some of them, enough numbers, then let's take a look at the adjustments. If you don't see the adjustment palettes, maybe you're not in photography workspace. So make sure that you're under photography workspace in the top right corner. Select that photography. Then you should be able to find adjustment. And there are a lot of different adjustment layers. We'll start with labels. If you click onto labels, note under the layers palette, the labels adjustment layer is added. And the property of labels adjustment shows up. Right? Now, I'm going to zoom in. It looks like this. There is a slider on the bottom and slider on the top. You usually don't use this bottom slider, so don't touch that. And on the left side, there are 3 eyedroppers. And if you look at it closely, inside, this is set black. This is set white. And if you double click onto the set black one, which happened to be the top one, this color picker appears. We had that one earlier. So just simply double click onto this color picker. Let's set the black point to 555 in RGB. Everything else, you may have different numbers, but all it really matters is the RGB information we're dealing with. Photographers deal with RGB. Designers deal with CMYK. We deal with RGBs here. And let's put it used to be 0. Let's change it to 555 so that it's no longer just a black ink, but it has a slight information lightness on it. Okay. Once you put 555, I'll say OK. And then it asks you if you like to change the default numbers, and then you can go ahead and then say yes to it. Let's do the same thing to white points. Let's do the same thing to white points. Double click to bring out the highlights information. Targeting highlights. And this time, again, take a look at the RGB. It probably says 255 all the way through. Bring it down to 250 for RGB so that it's no longer a paper white, but a little bit of the details in there. And once you set that, you can go ahead and say OK, and you're gonna have another warning window, but just go ahead and say OK to it. So you are preparing your Photoshop for a real tonal adjustment ready, basically. So remember to do this at home too with your computer. We're not doing it for anything for gray. Well, the gray, you might be curious what this gray point is, aren't you? I mean, we have done the black point, and then we did the white points. What does this gray point means? This actually, if you know a Lightroom, then this is basically a white balance selector tool that you can use this one to white balance. But so that is one way to white balance, but I'm going to show you another way to white balance. You can simply just come over here and then click onto the area that is supposed to be neutral. We don't know exactly, but click onto this, and then wherever that I click on will be neutral. Therefore, other area becomes neutral, and then you can see how it's not so working so greatly, but I think it's more like these kind of things too. But undo whatever you do with gray point selector tool. We're not using this one. How are you guys doing? Good? Do you need to stretch? You can stand out and stretch too. Let me just go over a few more things, and then we're going to have a short break. So don't follow, but look at the projector. After you set up the white point and then black point, what you like to do is to, again, go into, say, a black point selector tool, and then specify where would be the darkest dark in the picture. To do so, I would do a little weird things in here. I'm going to hold on Option keys and then start grabbing this shadow information slider inward slightly. As I bring this information, the slider in, I started to slowly reveal the darkest area of the picture, basically. That you can see the nose of the doggy. Also, part of the shadow area underneath the plant, that black that shows up, that is the darkest dark information in the picture. What you like to do is to target the area that shows up as like the first area of the black here. Where do you think is the first area? Somewhere in the, I would like to say in the nose too. Nose or some of those areas in here too. Did you say? So I'm still holding on. I'm going to actually zoom in at the same time. Ooh. One of these areas I'm zooming in too much. I'm looking at the pixels. And then I'll click onto the area that is supposed to be like somewhere around here. And then specifying that is the darkest dark. I'll specify the lightest light by clicking onto the white point selector, hold Option, and bring in the highlights in this time. Let me just zoom out a little so you can see the entire picture. The area that shows first is the head. Of the dog. I can just keep moving in until I see all whites, but I would like to specify where would it be the first areas. Okay, around here. It became really contrasty and dark overall. Then I will bring in the midtones to reveal that too. So it used to be here. Now it is here. Here to here. Here to here. I see some problems around the shadow areas. It started to become a little too dark in here. And then you can see that this is clipping. So maybe the area that I picked wasn't a right area. I'm going to actually go back in and redo this. I'm going to get rid of this adjustment layer on the trash can, and I'll bring in the levels again, and I'll do this again. I'll hold on to Option, click to select the black point selector, and start bringing in the shadow informations in. I think I'm going to go in here this time. So I went to his nose. I'll do a white point selector, click, and specify where would it be the whitest area. Hold Option and slightly start to bring in the highlight information. Let me tell you one thing in here, that if I start bringing in the highlights, this one, in, I'm basically clipping the information, the highlights. I start to bring in slightly inward, and still when it is cyan color, I specify this would be white actually. Because we know that this picture has a cyan shift on it. So we probably don't have to wait until it becomes all white. Cyan, but I know this is the brightest area, so I will specify that as the brightest area. This looks much better this time, I think. So when image start to look strange, I would delete and then redo, because the previous one was here. I think, oh, I got rid of it, sorry. But the previous one, you could see clearly that it has too much contrast, and I started to lose the informations. But with this, the tones and then also colors are corrected. Let's take a look at the numbers here too. So these are sampled areas. This is the original samples numbers, and this is after. You see how it has less blue? So numbers started to become closer overall slightly than before. Means that this image is becoming a little more neutral overall. Improvement. Getting closer.
So when you first did it, that is when you said black equal to 5 and white equal to 250.
This may be confusing, but this one is a one-time thing.
That first one.
Yes, one-time thing that once you set it to your Photoshop and then save that target numbers, next time you come back, you don't have to do it.
Every picture.
You don't have to do it. The Photoshop remembers it. Yeah. Do you want to try this? Do you have questions? Do you want to have a break first? Let's have a break first then, and let's come back.